What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home here at fakepigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me, as always, is Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? This fantasy football season is only a couple weeks away, and I'm ready to talk about our most despised position in the industry.
You mean the best position, my favorite position? Absolutely. If you have missed them, we talked quarterback, we talked running back. We will be bringing you wide receivers shortly. But tonight we are going to talk top 12 tight ends. And if you're enjoying the show, if you like the content we're cranking out, make sure you mash that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. But Brian, let's jump into it. Let's talk some tight ends. A position that I think it's really interesting because it not only does it offer some elite options at the position. And while some may look at it and go, well, that's a lot of guys and a lot of question marks and a lot of what do we do with them? But then it also offers a lot of opportunity if you pick the right guys, if you do the right whatever. So, but let's start at the top and kind of like we did with quarterbacks. George Kittle, Travis Kelce. I think it's a clear 1-2. I'm not really sure which order most people would have it in, but for you, is there a solid debate here?
Yeah, I've actually gone back and forth between the two, ranking them 1 and 2, and just recently switched to Kittle as being the number one guy, and I think that just has a lot to do with he is the clear top dog in that pass offense. Whereas Travis Kelce, although he is a touchdown machine and just year in and year out, we know what we're getting from him. He has to contend with Tyreek Hill, CEH now. So I just think like the fact that he is the number one option in the 49ers offense, I think kind of puts him slightly ahead of Kelce in my rankings.
Yeah, I go back and forth too. Part of me, like, if I'm drafting a tight end that I think would be the most valuable to my franchise, like in real NFL terms, I think George Kittle's that just because of his blocking ability, because of his unique ability to line up at different spots. I also have Kittle number one, and we'll drop our rankings here shortly. Yeah, like you said, like I go back and forth. It's okay. Well, the Chiefs have Mahomes, but they also have Hardman and Watkins and Tyreek Hill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all these other weapons. Where the Niners have an injured Debo, a rookie, and Brandon Ayuk. They're gonna run more, so I mean, obviously, more opportunity for Mahomes to throw than Garoppolo, but still plenty of opportunity. And Jimmy G looks at George Kittle so often that it's really hard to kind of. I mean, obviously you're nitpicking, you're going back and forth, but for me, it's Kittle. So let's throw up your rankings since I went first last night. Let's pick yours apart, and then we'll go through mine. So there is Brian's rankings, and as I mentioned, if you are enjoying the show, make sure you mash that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. Uh, but Brian, I guess for you, from when we talked back in March, is there a player or a couple players that have really moved on your rankings?
I continuously move Hayden Hurst up in my rankings as he's stepping into that Atlanta offense, taking over for Austin Hooper, who we saw Austin Hooper be, a top 5 preseason pick last season, and he produced to the level. I don't think there's any reason to believe that Hayden Hurst can't step into that role and produce just as good as Hooper. Another guy who I've gone back and forth with him possibly being into that elite level, and that's Darren Waller.
Mm-hmm.
Just even with the addition of all the youngsters on the outside, I actually think that's going to help his like being so valuable for the Raiders. I think he becomes even more of an increased part of that offense, because with those guys on the outside taking up a little more attention from the defense, they're going to be less able to kind of center around Waller and what he and Carr kind of developed last season.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about him, but before I go through that, I want to read off your list for anybody listening on the podcast version. So Brian's got Kittle, Kelsey. He's got Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, Hayden Hurst, Jared Cook, Noah Fant, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, and Austin Hooper. Yeah, so on Waller, I actually just traded for him in a contract dynasty league. And obviously, like in terms of what the price I am paying for him, I'm excited about it. But I do have some questions about. Okay, we have a Raiders team that added Brian Edwards. We have a Raiders team that added Henry Ruggs. We have a Raiders team that Josh Jacobs is going to be prevalently involved. They have Tyrell. They added Nelson Aguilar. We'll see what that is. Uh, you know, there's a lot of new faces to feed, and obviously Waller can still be the primary one. Like he could be the, like obviously to a lesser extent, but he could be the Travis Kelce. Like Travis Kelce is such a primary focus of what the Chiefs do on offense, especially in the passing game. I could see Darren Waller still being that guy, but yeah, I do worry about a guy. You know, we saw Jared Cook was there, and then Waller stepped in, and how much volume he sees. I think that is interesting. If the volume dips down, can he, like you mentioned, can he be more effective knowing that there's other weapons there to kind of garner some interest from defenders, or does he really need those to pepper with 100 and something targets, or is this an offense that maybe improves a little bit, and both things can be true. My other question was, and you kind of alluded to it when you talked Hayden Hurst, but with Hayden Hurst and Austin Hooper, I'm, and I'll post my rankings here in a second, but Hurst is obviously a guy we're both big fans of this year. We love his potential in Atlanta. We like how he fits. We like some of the stuff he flashed during the end of his kind of season last year at Baltimore. Um, but with Austin Hooper, are we maybe not giving him enough credit as a player for what he did last year, or was it really a lot of the system that kind of put him in place to be really productive? And now that he's in Cleveland with other options, and an offense that we do have question marks about, even though I expect it to be better. I guess just what's your read on Austin Hooper as a player and how he fits with what Hayden Hurst is stepping into?
We've talked about this at length prior to even getting into fantasy football season, and Austin Hooper as a player, I think he's good. He's pretty good as a tight end. I just don't think that he produced the numbers that he did because of his ability. I think it was more so about what that offense brings to the table in Atlanta with Julio and Calvin Ridley on the outside, and Matt Ryan being such a accurate passer. That being said, like you kind of alluded to, he's going to an offense in Cleveland where there are also big time weapons on the outside in Odell, and if Jarvis Landry can get healthy, and with two dynamic running backs. But the big question mark is going to be, and I continue to talk about this, is what Baker Mayfield are we going to see back there in Cleveland? Yeah. And is he going to be the quarterback that can, carry these guys as being those wide receiver ones, wide receiver twos, and even bringing Hooper along with them as a tight end one again, which I have him right at the back end right there, which I think is totally plausible, even with David Njoku sticking around in Cleveland.
Yeah,
Austin Hooper and that offense should score enough.
Yeah, I mean, so Njoku was the other kind of elephant in the room. Like, there was talks of him like requesting a trade, and now it seems like that might have gone away, and they're kind of working to get both of them in the offense. But yeah, I mean, Hooper last year and this year, or I guess 2 years, 2018, 2019, was a guy who was seeing 90 to 100 targets. Like, if he gets that, obviously he can be a top 7, top 6 option at the position. I just don't know that we'll see that. I think he'll still be really productive in terms of his catch rate. I just don't know if the volume can be there, and that's kind of where I'm a little concerned. And as I throw up my rankings, you can see some of the differences that I have. And Austin Hooper doesn't even make the list. So I go Kittle, Kelsey, Ertz Andrews, Waller Gesicki, Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Jared Cook, Tyler Higbee, and Noah Fant. So when we talked back in March, it was right after Gronk signed. I had Gronk in my initial rankings. I don't know what to do with him. Like, part of me thinks like he could be a fantasy monster and a top 3 option. And, if I'm drafting and I'm in a league where I can pick up other tight ends, he becomes a guy that I think has tremendous upside at the position. And I would be happy to take and then be ready to cut bait early if he doesn't look good. But if I'm looking at a season-long perspective, I do have some concerns, like more of like if I'm looking at, I'm in a best ball league, like I don't know what we're gonna get over 16 games.
Yeah, Rob Gronkowski is a guy for me who we'll talk about this in a little bit, but he fell like right outside of my top 12. Like because I love Tom Brady this year. Again, we keep saying this, but I think there is a good chance that Rob Gronkowski, delivers on a tight end 1 kind of performance for the season, just with the ability to get in the end zone and the rapport that he has with Brady. I don't think we're going to see anything different in Tampa. I just worry about the opportunity that he's going to see with OJ Howard still there, and then they continue to talk him up in Tampa with the 2 big-time wide receivers on the outside, which Brady's never had in New England, except for the one season he had Randy Moss, but there was never that number 2 guy who was at the level of what Chris Godwin is. So,
but would it be an off season in Tampa if we didn't have OJ Howard as actually good type? Like, I feel like we've been waiting for this guy to pop, and it's just like we've seen a little bit of instances, but as a consistent fantasy option, I don't know. But I think your point, like Gronk, if you like Brady and you like this offense and you think there could be a lot of points scored, I think Gronk is somebody you should be interested in. I didn't have Brady in my top 12, so that's why Gronk's just outside my top 12. But for me, honestly, like if we rank this like our top 15, our top 18, I feel like there's the top 2 guys like Kittle and Kelsey. There's kind of that next cluster, which is like Ertz and Andrews and Waller, and then there's just a big cluster, and like Gronk could fit in there. TJ Hawkinson can fit in there. Like there's some other guys that we didn't even rank. In your rankings, Austin Hooper fits in that group. Like there's a bunch of guys that kind of fit in that cluster, and it's really about sorting through them and figuring out who your favorite options are.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, because I think this position even more so than quarterback, other than Kittle and Kelsey, I think you could find a good value from 3 all the way down to even 30 week in and week out, just with the like what the situation is and who they're playing that week. I don't think really there's that many guys that are going to separate in that next group. I think we're going to see a lot of similar scoring and a lot of similar outputs by those guys. But in that second group, there's a few of them who have the potential to be that tight end 1, like a Darren Waller, and like the guy who I'm extremely high on in Evan Ingram, if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, but let's talk about him, because I was gonna, if we're talking about who was the toughest to rank for me, it was Evan Ingram, and it's not even close. Because as you mentioned, if he's healthy for 15 or even 14 games, like he has a real ability to be the tight end 1 in fantasy. Like he could put up monster performances. There's plenty of opportunity for him to be the primary pass catcher. And as much as I like Slayton and Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard and Saquon's there, but like Evan Ingram could be a huge part, could have 120 targets, could be a fantasy monster, but could also play 3 games and miss a lot of time. And for that, I had to rank him 7th.
I feel like we're going down the same rabbit hole that we did with Jordan Reed. It's just, we think this guy, he has all the talent in the world, and you just think he's just going to blow up one year and put it all together and give us 16 games of of just stupendous performances, and it never happened. And Evan Ingram, he's starting to kind of mirror that career path where he just cannot stay on the field. But when he is on the field, he's a tight end one, and he's an elite option at the position. But it's whether or not you're willing to take the risk for the draft capital of where he's kind of going right now, which is it's the risky part with him.
Yeah, so you're saying in 7 years he's going to end up with the Niners
as the backup.
Yeah, so I'm looking at ADP right now. Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz, Waller. Ingram is the tight end 6. Gronk is the tight end 7. Hunter Henry at tight end 8 is interesting because we have a lot of questions about what the Chargers offense may look like. But from a talent perspective, he's absolutely worthy of being in that top 5 conversation. But it's just a matter do we expect the volume to be there? Because I think it can be. But what does that volume look like? How many opportunities does he get in the red zone? What could his numbers potentially be? I think for me, that's kind of why he ended up in that kind of that 7, 8, 9, 10 range. And obviously for you, he's at 10. So, yeah, I mean, talk to me about him and kind of your thought process there.
Hunter Henry, he's another guy who's coming into that Chargers offense, which has a drastically different look with Tyrod Taylor under center. And, I'm looking over Charles Clay's career stat line and his years in Buffalo. He saw 2 consecutive years with 77 or more targets, but he never had more than 57 receptions at the position. And that's, if we're looking at even Hunter Henry, if we're assuming he's, 1.5 times better than Charles Clay, we're looking at 65, maybe 70 receptions out of Henry, that's pretty damn good, production. And
right. Well, and we also have to factor in that they're probably going to throw a lot more with the Chargers. So maybe it's, 2 times. Maybe it's, instead of 80 targets in an offense that didn't throw it a ton, maybe if we kind of extrapolate that over an offense throwing 300 more times over the course of the season, now we're looking at 95 targets. Now we're looking at 83 catches, and now we're looking at it's just that those touchdowns, because as much as I don't want to lean on those because they're so hard to predict, when you're looking at a guy that could get 3 touchdowns from your tight end position, that's not something you're going to love starting, because the odds of me using him versus using a streaming option in a fantastic matchup, I'd rather just wait and take Will Dissly or TJ Hawkinson or Mike Gesicki or Hayden Hurst or whoever, Dallas Goddard. And that's another guy that we didn't even mention.
Yep. I was just going to say, Goddard is a guy who I think we see a world where there's a good possibility that both he and Zach Ertz finish at top 10 at the position for this season. With like we talked about before with Carson Wentz, is the only person on the outside is Jalen Reagor and Alshon Jeffrey, who is he ever going to put together a full season and stay healthy?
Speaking of a guy that never plays.
Yeah, and even so, he and Carson Wentz just don't seem to have a good connection for that matter anyway. So, I mean, we're going to see again an Eagles offense where Goddard and Zach Ertz are probably targets 1 and 2, and Goddard's probably looking at 55, 60 catches floor this year, and
So, of the guys that didn't make your top 12, who would be the next guy? Who's the closest to being 13?
To me, it's a battle between Goddard and Gronk, and I would probably go Gronk just because I like Tom Brady a little bit better than Wentz this year. But Goddard is right there.
Yeah. Jonnu Smith is in that conversation for me. I'm still worried about this passing game and the number of attempts, but he just it's hard with him because when the Delaney Walker injury happened 2 years ago, I thought, here we go, Jonnu breakout, nothing. The following years when he finally started to become a piece of the offense, and he's so versatile. They used him in the running game. He's broken off big long ones in passing game, down the field, short screen passes. There's so much you could do with him. I just if it's an offense is going to run as much as they do, and he's going to be so sporadic, I don't know if I can quite get there. Um, but yeah, I mean Goddard's definitely in that conversation. Gronk's in that conversation. T.J. Hawkinson's in that conversation. Like I've gone on and on about how much how excited I am about that Lions passing game. So seeing him, in the end, and as we talked about with quarterback, traditionally I only like to draft one of these guys and just kind of play the matchups and work the waiver wire when I need to. But with COVID being a reality and the potential of your guy missing the game, you have to kind of judge, okay, how many bench spots do I have? What are my league mates doing? But I feel like especially when you're talking quarterback versus tight end, like I'd rather take two guys at tight end and be able to play the matchups a little bit more and knowing, okay, if I have to have one guy out for COVID, I have another guy who can step in. Obviously, there's a ton of depth, and so you could play a couple of these guys in as a flex anyways. But is that something you're considering going into the season?
More than likely, yeah, that will probably be a technique I use because I don't see a world where I'll have either George Kittle or Travis Kelce on any of my redraft rosters. I'm just not willing to eat the second or third round price tag.
Yeah.
Um, I'll probably see a lot of Hayden Hurst. He's probably my favorite tight end target this year. Another guy that we haven't mentioned yet who kind of fits the Jonnu Smith talk is Ian Thomas in Carolina, who is now the number one tight end in Carolina. And with Joe Brady there, we're going to see a lot of spread, which means a lot of passing. And we saw Teddy Two Gloves be able to, sling it all over the field with that short passing game with the Saints. So Ian Thomas is a guy who could break through and be, top 10 at the position at the end of the year. And I'll probably find myself having a lot of shares of him, with the later picks while loading up on wide receivers and running backs earlier on.
Yeah, I want to go back to the idea of drafting Kittle or Kelsey early, but before we move on from these guys, we have to I'm shocked he hasn't come up yet. We're 22 minutes in. What happened to the Jay Sternberger hype train? Did that derail? Are we not on that anymore?
The whole point of the hype train for Jay Sternberger is for me not to talk about him, so that way he's
We can
another
actually
guy
get him in drafts.
who slips through the weave here. Because
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it last episode talking quarterbacks with Aaron Rodgers, why he wasn't in the top 12. There's just no options on the outside. So Sternberger, we saw it at the end of last season and in the playoffs. He is a dynamic receiver at the position, and he is another guy who I will be quietly targeting in my drafts.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing about doing this is you want to be excited, you want to pimp your players, but you also I want to be able to actually get these guys. And if I talk about them all off season long, everyone in my league is going to draft them 3 rounds too high. I do have a part of me is is he Jeff Janis? Is he Aaron? He's an Aaron Rodgers offense and doesn't use the tight end traditionally a lot, but he looks more like a receiver and could do some unique things. So he is another guy, kind of in that Jonnu role that I would be happy to take late. But let's talk taking Kittle and Kelsey early because I think I'm open to it, and I'm actually based on the names that we've talked about, and obviously league settings, kind of vary this and stuff too. But I'm very comfortable taking either of these guys in the end of the first, early second. I have to understand that my roster is going to look different, and I'm not going to be able to be as aggressive at other positions, maybe. But the difference between Kittle and Kelsey and kind of that next group, even as good as Mark Andrews can be, as Zach Ertz can be, just the lock and loaded stud you're gonna have. That's like drafting a top, 7 to 15 wide receiver in most seasons, and he's playing tight end for you. So you got to play him there. Plus, you get to still take other receivers and target later, draft Brandon Cooks, draft Mike Williams, and draft all the other guys that we like. And obviously, if you need a running back in your first round because you need that quote unquote workhorse, then drafting a tight end like Kelsey or Kittle probably isn't happening for you unless you get them in the very early part of the second. But I'm absolutely fine taking either of those guys in the end of the first, beginning of the second.
Yeah, I think one of the deterrents that I get from taking those guys is the fact that back when Gronk was the number one guy and there was no question about it, and he was the tight end that everybody wanted in fantasy drafts, I was taking him early on, as early as possible, just because I knew I was getting double-digit touchdowns every single season. And I just don't know how sustainable the kind of production that Kittle and Kelsey have been producing. Kittle being in a run-first offense, so I think there's a lot of opportunities for touchdowns from him to be stolen within the red zone area by them running the ball. And then Kelsey, he's just getting older. He's not that he's been injured, but I could see him getting a little more banged up every year where he's, you see him kind of gimping around on the field, and they have this new fancy toy in the backfield. So I just don't know how much we're going to see Patrick Mahomes lean on him near the goal line. I think we could see a lot more running or a lot more like motion kind of plays, like jet sweeps with Tyreek, Mecole, and CEH. So I think that's what scares me the most out of them, because if you do get a guy like an Evan Ingram 3 or 4 rounds later, who
Your dog is not a fan of that call.
No, I did hear. I it's so difficult for me to take the tight ends at the top that aren't named Gronk in their prime. I know they're amazing, but
the one thing I will say, and this may cause me to flip-flop our guys again, but I'm going through in PPR rankings, obviously, all the way back to 2016. Travis Kelce has been the number one tight end in PPR. There was a run, I believe, from like 2007 to 2017. It's like a decade where it was a different tight end every year. But like Kelsey's been that guy, and if you're in PPR, maybe you go with Kelsey. Maybe if you're in half point or standard, or I guess what used to be standard, you might look a little more at Kittle. But I'm happy taking either of those guys.
My dogs are going crazy right now. I apologize. It's just me at home. The wife left me at home by myself.
They're just mad at your terrible Travis Kelce and not taking him early. They just want you to target the tight end position.
So speaking to what I was talking about with touchdowns, I just looked it up. George Kittle's never scored more than 5 touchdowns in a season, and Travis Kelce last year, I think he had 9. Hold on. I just deleted that. But yeah, like you said, he's traditionally getting like 90 catches a season, Travis Kelce, but like last year, 97 receptions, and he only had 5 touchdowns. So if we see him, lose some of that ability to break away from tacklers and they start to lean more on the ground game, I think you do see a world where the Darren Wallers, Evan Ingrams, Mark Andrews kind of catch up and shorten the gap between the top 2 guys.
We'll see. I'm a lot more optimistic on those, but I always overdraft tight ends, so it's what I do. But I think in general, like, we're pretty simpatico in the fact that we're either getting Kelsey or Kittle early. I'm willing to take them a lot earlier. If they fall to you, then cool. Or we're waiting till like the very end and taking whoever's happened to be sitting there.
Yeah, to that point, I think I've actually taken a defense and a kicker prior to my tight end in some redraft leagues, just because there was a guy that I was targeting and I knew I was taking him and I knew nobody else even remembered this person, and I just waited.
Yeah, I mean, if you get what you want, then I get it. Like, people, especially in home leagues, like kickers and defense, like, it's funny. Like, I always, it's like clockwork.
There's always one guy.
Yeah. What round are okay? It should be 16. So we'll go 12, and then someone. Oh, Baltimore's the best. I'm taking them, and then everyone else starts to kind of get that train rolling.
Man, 12 for you? Ooh, that's late.
I mean,
I've seen Justin Tucker taken in the 8th round.
That's
insane.
Unless you're Justin Tucker, like, you don't need to be drafting him that early. Okay, before we get out of here, Brian, is there one tight end that no matter where he falls, you're just not taking this year?
Oh man. That's a really difficult one, but I would probably go Mark Andrews. It I love the player. I love Baltimore's offense. I think Lamar Jackson is amazing. I just worry about the passing offense. I don't know. I just what we saw in the playoffs last year. I think we're going to see a lot more defenses like try to stymie the running game as much as possible and make them beat them through the air. And until I see it on a game by game basis, I'm very wary of that offense.
That's really interesting. Maybe we'll have to do a little deeper dive into Baltimore because obviously they added J.K. Dobbins. They're gonna run the ball. They have Lamar. It'll be interesting to see. Like the Titans obviously created a blueprint. Let's see if other teams can follow suit. I want to be excited about the Seattle tight ends, and we didn't even talk Tyler Higbee well to figure out that. Like I feel like there's value there. I feel like no matter which guy you start, you're gonna be frustrated because like with Greg Olsen, Will Dissly, and like there's just gonna be somebody there that kind of like you expect. Okay, it's a this guy game, and the other guy steps up, and then they'll have some random Jacob Hollister game, and like it, just trying to figure that mess out. Like I don't really want to go there if I can avoid it. If someone clearly emerges and I can to get them off the waiver wire, well then that's different. But at this point, like I won't be drafting there. But there's just so much value at tight end. And we didn't even mention my boy Trey Burton, who I'm legitimately targeting. I think there is potential there. Like obviously, like in a 12-team one tight end league, he's probably not somebody I'm drafting, but keeping him on my watch list in 2 tight end leagues, in tight end premium leagues, in tight end dynasty leagues. He's somebody I'm drafting, somebody I'm adding, somebody I'm looking at because I think he can help you. I think, everyone's going to be like Jack Doyle. I'm going to be like Trey Burton, 7 touchdowns, 800 yards, monster bounce back. I know it was terrible in Chicago, and I might look like an idiot because I tend to, and we should talk about this too, guys we hitched our wagon to that still haven't done anything that we still waiting for, like CJ Anderson and Trey Burton are my dudes. So,
Man,
yeah, it's pretty terrible. All right, Brian, this was good. Like I said, if you missed our quarterbacks, if you missed our running backs, make sure you go check those out. If there's a tight end that you think should be higher, should be lower, let us know. And then we will be back to talk some wide receivers. If you are enjoying the show, if you are enjoying what we're doing, mash that thumbs up, hit subscribe, tell a friend, tell 2 friends, tell them to tell 2 friends. Spread the good word of the Angle of Pursuit. Check us out on all platforms, wherever you get podcasts. For Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.